Hello, my true crime lovelies. How are you? I hope you are well. I hope you are as lovely in life as you are in my mind. And if not, I hope you're on your way to getting there because, let's not do toxic positivity. Sometimes life is not lovely. We are not lovely. And it's okay. We're here together. We're going to figure it out. So I've got jail calls for Miss Boone. They are from June 3rd until July 2nd, just because that's how I originally ordered them. And so we're going to keep in that rhythm. Although I might make an exception because I'm kind of curious as to her phone log activity as we run up to the trial, her family court trial, which is Monday, August 25th. So we know that her flying monkeys have been helping her with her documents. I just wonder if there's like a frenzy of phone calls. So I might make an exception and pull them. Now, will the little annex get them to me any faster? I don't know. I might not have them before the trial, but we can still be nosy even after the fact, right? So this month that we're going to cover, there are some new characters, which is why it took me a little longer because I wanted to look them up and find out about them so I could bring it to you guys. There's also lots of ignored calls from even old faithfuls, like people not responding, not accepting the calls. And we'll go through it because it's not just that it's ringing, it's saying not accepted versus unanswered, which I find kind of interesting. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about that. But we'll get into it. But first, I want to run the intro, thank the members. I want to thank you for being here. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We would love to have you. All right, I'll see you on the other side. All right, let's get right into it. We're going to start here. We're going to go in reverse because the first date is June 3rd. And when we end, it'll be July. You get it. Okay, so I've put in who I have surmised is calling. And then we have the date that the calls come in, the result. So not accepted versus no answer. That's what I was talking about. So we'll see how the tides have changed. And on this one, you can see nobody talked to her on this page. And these were all free calls. And the third was a Tuesday. I double checked to see if it was like a Saturday because I know they get free messages on Saturday. But this was a Tuesday. So anybody who's been in Lowell Annex or in the Florida DOC, let us know, like, how do the free calls work over there? Okay, so we have June 3rd. We have at 8:55, 8:57, and 8:59 that she called Peter Gunthel of half of the Delapine Creatives, the folks that are making the documentary, or they introduced themselves as making a documentary on Sarah. No answer. And those were all free calls. And then also on the 3rd, she calls her son at 9:01. So 8:59, Peter, she's given up on Peter. 2 minutes later, she's going to harass her son. And his says not accepted. So it's not a no answer. So what I'm taking this to mean, and you guys let me know what you think, but is that he picked up the phone and it's like 1 if you accept, 2 if you don't, and he put 2 not accepted, and that's why it was logged this way. Not to be deterred, she decides to go back to Peter, so 9:02 and 9:04. And this time, it's not no answer, it's not accepted. I wonder if Peter's had enough or if Mrs. G has had enough. And so 9 o'clock on a Tuesday, phone calls are not acceptable. Okay. So then also on the 3rd, she calls Peter G again at 9:05 and it's not accepted. And maybe it says free call because they weren't accepted. We'll look at these. I'm just curious. I'm picking up on all these other bits of data, trying to make sense of them. Maybe it's free because there was no call. So John Castlewix, he's a new player. And I don't know where he's come from, but I want to show you his profile on LinkedIn. So he works at Raytheon and went to Seminole State College of Florida. He's been at Raytheon for 13 years. He also has a military background. Is it on this page? It's not on this page, which is, I was like, maybe it's a friend of her brother's. Here it is, Specialist, U.S. Army from 2009 to 2012. 2012, you know what I mean. And then right after that, he went to work for Raytheon. So I was like, and it's defense, information assurance. He was in Guam. He was in El Paso. Here it says on site, but it doesn't say what the site is. But he's been principal systems engineer since Feb 2024, right? These get a little confusing because here it says like senior systems engineer 1 from March 2019 to present in Guam. So there's an overlap. I think he just didn't put an end date here. And then he's also over on our Facebook and he's a ginger. That's him. I believe this is him here in the group photo. He and I are not friends, no surprise. So I can't see his friends on there. I can see like who he's in contact with, but he does have a sister, Elizabeth Altman. Other than that, I could find no connection of like why Sarah would be calling him. So if you guys have seen something or heard something, say something to the lovelies and let us know. Okay, so he did answer the phone and she called at 9:07. They talked for 4 minutes, 40 seconds. This was a free call. So he did pick it up, called a person, hung up after the 4 minutes. But an hour later, she calls him again at 10:02 and they talk for 19 minutes, prepay on the public phone, and Sarah hung up on that call. We go back to Peter Gunthal, not accepted. This is on the 3rd at 1:28, 1:48, not accepted. Calls her son, 1:50, not accepted. And then she calls her son at 1:51. They talked for almost 30 minutes, 29:49, and then he hung up. Okay, we're still on the 3rd. We're at 19:03, so 7 in the evening. Peter G, not accepted. Then she calls on the 4th, so the next morning at 9:22.
And wouldn't you know it, Peter's got time. Peter's got time today.
So they talk for 10 minutes and 31 seconds, and then he hangs up. On the same day, she calls him at 1:51, 1:52, 1:54, 1:55, 1:56, 1:57, and not nan one. He ain't got time. He ain't got no more time for you, Sarah Boone. He did not accept any of those. And it's not accepted, not answered. Interesting. Then she called John on the 5th, 9:37 in the morning, and they talked for 30 minutes and they timed out. So they did the full 30 and then the call ended. Then she calls Brian on the 6th. 10:27 in the morning, 10:29 in the morning. He does not accept. On the 8th, she calls this John Castlewix again, 9:43. He doesn't accept. 9:45. He doesn't accept. I hope he's not married because I would feel some type of way if my spouse were taking calls early in the morning from an inmate. Okay, so then she calls her son, not accepted on the 8th. This is at 3:17, 3:19. I know you guys said Florida school is out by June 8th, so I guess she's, I don't know. I'm sure he's out with his friends having fun. I hope so. Okay, then we've got John again, 8:41 in the morning on the 9th. They talk for 4 minutes and 34 seconds. And then also on the 9th, she calls him back at 10:18. And they talk for 25 minutes. Would love to know what they're talking about. She calls her son on the 9th at 11:09. It says pin limit, so I think she could not, I don't know, too many calls. I'm not sure what the limitations are around the pin. So she also calls him at 11:12, not accepted. So whatever that pin limit was 3 minutes before, it's resolved because then he doesn't accept. Then she calls Peter at 11:14 a.m. on the 9th. They talk for almost 30 minutes, 29:39, and then he hangs up. Calls her son again on the 9th at 3:19, not accepted. Calls him at 3:21. They talk for 9 minutes and 54 seconds, and then he hangs up. Then at 3:32, she calls again. They talk for 25 minutes and 36 seconds. Then she calls Peter G on the 11th, 18:19. So what is that? 6 in the evening? Not 6 in the morning. Police at my door. Fresh Adidas sweeping across the bathroom floor. No, not that. This is in the evening. And Peter does not answer. She calls her son 2 minutes later. He does not answer. Not accepted. It's not even not answered. Peter didn't accept. Son didn't accept. She calls her son 1 minute later, 6:22, and not accepted. Then the next day at 11:04 in the morning, she calls her son. They talk for 30 seconds, and then he hangs up.
Probably like, Mom, I'm busy.
Then 17:55, so 5, almost 6 o'clock, 5:55 for 1 second, and then he hangs up. I don't know what that was about. Then a pin limit for her son, so 0, and another pin limit for the son. Then this is still on the 18th. So, and I marked this here, 6:13 is when the court, 6th District Appellate Court filed a notice about the appeal warning, like you are running out of time if we don't hear from you, or if you don't file your brief, or we don't hear, like basically a request for an extension, you will lose your right to an appeal. So I just marked that to see if there's any more activity, but there wasn't really. She started calling Peter more on the 18th, but he is still not picking up. Okay, but the son, she called him, we did that one, pin limit. So on the 18th, also at 6:26 in the evening, 14:39. They talked for 14 minutes and some odd seconds. So again, here she's calling Peter on the 18th at 7:46, 7:48, and then the next morning on the 19th at 8:41 in the morning. So he did not, one was not accepted, and then this one says he hung up, but it's 0 duration. So like he accepted and hung up. What was that about? Like, call me in the morning, click. So you get the free calls. You can talk when the recording is going on and the person can hear you. Don't ask me how I know. Not accepted, that 8:41 in the morning. So she hasn't talked to Nicole here either. So I don't know if she knows yet about the appeal notice, the warning, because she doesn't end up filing anything until 6:30, which by then Josh, like we slept together last night, Mr. Joshua Adams had already filed for the extension by the time she weighed in. In fact, I think it was accepted. It was already accepted, but I think Sarah's people are only looking at the Orange County website, so you couldn't see that he had filed for the extension because he only sent it to the 6th District Court of Appeals. But, nosy me, I went over to the 6th District and I could see that he had filed for that. And then on the Orange County website, it showed that the, extension had been granted. Oh, by the way, because today I'm recording this, you guys probably won't see it till the 17th, but I'm recording it on Saturday, August 16th. Her appellate brief is due on 9/1, and Koenig has not responded to Mr. Adams' request for withdrawal and replacing of an attorney. So I am not well versed in appellate work, but does Josh know that if there's no withdrawal approval, if that motion is not approved, that he has a brief due in like 15 days, 14 days? Is he going to be ready? Because I doubt that. I mean, I guess if Kranek appoints a new attorney, that attorney can file and say, hey, I need to get up to speed, similar to like the lower courts, but it just seems really weird. Yeah. Like he filed that extension request and then right quick filed to Kranek like, yeah, not going to be doing appellate work anymore. I think the judge is going to hold his feet to the fire and say he has to at least file the brief. Although, does that then hurt the second attorney, or technically the third, if the motion is eventually granted? Because then maybe that attorney would have picked something else. You know what I mean? Like pick other points to appeal. It's very strange. Or Kranek says, suck it up, buttercup. On 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I feel like Kranek saw the crazy note that Sarah sent asking for a new attorney, and then the actual attorney sends a motion to withdraw. So it seems like you would move it along, but I don't know. I see some judges like Judge Boyd who is like, if you need another attorney, you need to pay for it. Oh, and a lot of you guys are mentioning if for some godforsaken reason Sarah does get the $24,000 in the family law case, that she would no longer be indigent, so she would have to pay for an attorney, which I would love. I would hate for Brian to have to pay that money, but perhaps the billing, which a lot of you guys said the billing is the legal paper or the legal bill, basically like his, what is his, Josh Martin? Is his attorney's name Josh? I can't remember. There's so many Joshes running around. But Brian's attorney, his billing fees. And so maybe that's what the exhibit is. And that would be used as an offset. So hopefully if he has at least $24,000 in legal fees, that would negate paying Sarah $24,000 from 2020 to 2022 until Brian filed. But anyway, I digress. That came into my head and I was like, oh, what's going on with this appeal? I mean, because I'm not a fan of Sarah, but I'm a fan of justice. So I definitely don't want her to not be able to file her. Do I think she's going to win an appeal? Do I think she's going to win a new trial? I don't. But I would hate for it to fall through the cracks just because of like some paperwork confusion. You know what I mean? Call me crazy. Okay, anyway, the 19th, she's calling Peter at 8:43 in the morning, 8:43 and then 8:44. Those were not accepted. She calls John Castlewix at 8:46 and 8:48, not accepted. She calls Peter again at 8:49, not accepted. Then she calls John K, 8:50, not accepted. We're still on the 19th. 8:52, she calls Peter. 9:19, she calls Peter. 9:47, she calls Peter. Not accepted. So what do you guys think? Mrs. G was like, listen, buddy, pick a side, look alive. Okay, then John K, 9:48, not accepted. 9:50, no answer. He just let it ring. Ring, ring, ring. Then she calls, we're still on the 19th, Peter at 11:17, 1:21, and 2:22. One is not accepted, the other is time up. So I'm thinking it's PIN number per person. Like, for example, Son would have his own PIN number, Peter G would have his own, John K would have his own, Philip would have his own, and there's like a maximum per day, per week. And once you hit that, you're out. Oh, wait, no. I highlighted this for a reason and I skipped right over. She did talk to Peter on the 19th for an hour. Pay attention. So, and the time up in this instance, it's not PIN limit, it's time up because they use the full 30 minutes. She was like, and then I have to tell you, and then I blah, 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 blah. And then the voice comes on, your time is up. That's how I imagine it in my mind. So at 1:21, she calls him. He answers. They speak for 30 minutes. And then a minute after that call is up, 2:22, sorry, she calls again and they talk for another 30 minutes. So maybe this is when they're discussing the notice from the 6th District Court of Appeals. Like, hey, B, where's your paperwork? You're not going to get to have an appeal. You're not going to have a shot at an appeal filing if you don't get this together. Okay, so then on the 19th, she calls her son at 7:12 in the evening, not accepted. And then 7:14, and they talk for 15 minutes and 12 seconds, and then he hangs up. Then the next morning, bright and early, 9:49, she's calling Peter. He does answer. They talk for 25 minutes and 34 seconds. So she's getting her fill in. They've got about an hour and a half in 2 days. I'm sure she's feeling better. And then pin limit with John K. She calls her brother on the 20th at 3:27. They talk for 16 minutes. I'm sure she was dry begging or something. John K., she calls him at 6:27 on the 20th. And it says inmate hung up, but call duration is 0. So maybe before the audio came on about press 1, she hung up. I'm not sure. So 6:20, that was at 6:27. So 6:29, she calls him again. There's no answer. Then she calls her son, 6:30, not accepted. 6:32, they talk for 8 minutes, and then she hangs up. And then 7:14, she calls. They talk for 3 minutes, and he hangs up. Those are prepaid. This next one is going to be a free call to Richard Cosmas, who is another new player. He doesn't answer. She's calling him at 9:58 in the morning. So Richard also goes by Rick. I found him. So let's look at this. His email was associated with this company. And so there was this event, Finovate, but he's associated with this company, Profit Stars, or he was. And so then I looked from there, and via email, his email was listed here. So that's how he came up in the search. Then I found him on LinkedIn. He's in Oviedo in Florida. He looks to be an older gentleman. And so I cross-referenced where did he work at Profit Stars, and he worked there until March of 2012, and he worked there for 9 years. And that Innovate or Finovate and Profit Stars, they do work for people in the financial industry. I believe it's software that they sell, like to support and streamline things. So then he works for this mobile dialysis. So I was like, well, maybe he somehow knew Lana and that's how they got connected. I'm not sure. I don't know what their connection is. So he was CEO at Mobile Dialysis for 6 years, which just seems like a leap from like services for financial industries to dialysis to mobile dialysis. So usually like there's some kind of life change in there, but I don't know. Now he's a guide and proprietor for hiking, and he works, it's either Archie Hikes or RC Hikes, helping people convert their walks around the neighborhood into communes with nature, specializing in helping seniors and visitors. We guide folks every step of the way, from lacing footwear to avoid blisters to having a safe and incredible jaunt in the non-Disneyland natural wonder that are Central Florida woodlands. So yeah, so he's entered the chat of Sarah Boone. So she calls Richard on June 21st in the morning, 9:58. He doesn't answer. It's a free courtesy call. Then she calls Nicole, not accepted. On the 21st, she calls her at 10:01 10:03, 10:53, 10:55. So we went, none of these are accepted. It's not a no answer. It's not accepted. And those are all on a prepay card. And she calls Billy Lane, which I thought this was odd. She calls, they talk for a minute and then it's timed out. So again, trying to figure out, is it time up? It can't be for the day because then she calls someone else, but there's a pin limit. I need like a little guidebook of like, do they teach this to the inmates? Do the inmates talk to one another and figure it out? It doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, she called Billy Lane. 6:21. Maybe this is about the appeal issue. Not sure. Maybe she's looking for Owens. Who knows? Then she calls Kevin Beck. So I'm feeling like it's something to do with the criminal case. Something's going on. Appeal, right? Appellate issue? Because why else would you call Billy Lane on the 21st at 10:57 and then a couple minutes later you call Kevin Beck? Then she calls her son on the 21st at 5:13. She talks for almost 30 minutes. Then we have Nicole again. These are not except on the 21st, 7:01, 7:03. On the 22nd, 9:54 a.m., 9:56, 9:58. Finally, at 10:48, Nicole answers and she picks it up. 29 minutes, 49 seconds, and then Sarah hangs up. She's calling Billy Lane again. So definitely I think she's blowing Nicole up because she's trying to figure out what's going on with this appeal issue. Billy Lane, not accepted on the 22nd at 12:56. And then on the 22nd at 12:57. So she's like, it says not accepted, but she's going to call right back. And those were free calls for her. So on the 22nd at 1 o'clock, she then calls Peter, who answers, and they talk for almost 30 minutes, 29:36. It's a prepay call, and then she hangs up. Now, again on the 22nd, she's calling Billy Lane, which her JAC account is closed. So why are you calling Billy? He's not going to talk to you for free. Nobody likes you that much, Sarah. Well, I guess Nicole and Peter do, because not only they're not even talking to you for free, they're paying to talk to you. But Billy is a professional, and he seems to be of sound mind. So 2:49, she calls him, and he does not accept. She calls her son at 1:36 on the 22nd. They talk for 39 seconds and then he hangs up. She calls Billy Lane again at 6:32. He's got no time, no answer. Then she calls him again at 6:35 and that one is not accepted. So he has the phone, he sees the call and he's like,
oh, hell no. Not accepted.
Okay, and then we have David LaFontaine. So David LaFontaine is half of the couple that adopted the dogs. I can't remember the dog's name now, but if you guys watch Summa Cum Loudmouth, I'm going to call them, Helen and Keller. Heller and Keller, like Helen Keller. Oh my God, I'm tickled too much to even get it out right. Anyway, so they adopt Sarah's dogs and then they got in touch with her. The dogs have passed, but he and his wife still stay in touch with her. And if you remember her video calls from jail, they would do video calls with her. And they're on her visitors list for Lowell Annex. So they can do video calls again. So it says time up. So they talk for the full 30 minutes, she and David. And then she calls Rick at 10:45 on the 23rd. So this is her first call on the 23rd. They talk for 4 minutes, 40 seconds. Then she hangs up. Then she calls her son on the 23rd at 1:22, 1:23, 1:25. None of those are accepted. Then she calls Brian at 1:26, not accepted. Then she calls Peter G at 1:28, not accepted. Then she calls Brett Barnes, who's also a new player. So I did research on Brett, but there are two Bretts. One is a younger one and one is quite a bit older, like in his 60s, 70s. I'm not going to pull them up because I don't know which one is which. And, you know, just out of fairness to those guys, but he's a new player. So we will see. I think I just need to do a little more research because I try to tie different data points, but like I use number lookup, been verified, and then there's a third one. And so I haven't been able to like clearly correlate. There's one that has more correlations of data than the other, or triangulations of data, but I want to be like 100%, and he's not answering. So we're not really that pressed at this moment, but she calls him 1:30 twice and it's not accepted. So here, Billy Lane answers her call on the 23rd. They talk, she calls at 1:31 and they talk for 13 minutes. And it says prepay APOC, which is different than the prepay public. If anyone knows what the difference is, let me know. That was also the same with David LaFontaine. Okay, so then on the 23rd at 6:14, 6:16, she calls Peter G, not accepted, calls her son 2 minutes after calling Peter G for the last time. He does not accept. Look at all these durations of 0. Like, she is being ghosted, and you're not even in a year, ma'am. Imagine 2 years, 5 years, 20 years. Who's going to accept your calls, Sarah? Hopefully no one. So she calls her son. He doesn't answer. She calls her brother, and then she hangs up. So it's 0 durations. Then she calls Rick again at 8:56 the morning of the 24th. She calls him at 8:58. He does not accept either call. So we're still on the 24th. We're at 9 o'clock in the morning. She calls her son, not accepted. Calls Peter G at 9:01 and 10:43. He does not accept. She goes back to calling her son, 10:44, not accepted. And then she calls Brian in rapid succession, 10:45, 10:47, 10:49.
He ain't got time for you, girl.
And after all the nasty stuff she wrote about him, well, her letter is not out yet because it comes in July. I wouldn't take her calls. Like,
what we got to talk about?
Because the court stuff, we're going to let the judge handle it. The son, you could talk to him directly. Like, me and you, no, ma'am.
No.
I don't know. And a lot of you guys asked too if there will be like a restraining order, or I don't know that Brian's going to ask for that. I think he doesn't want to come across as having a lot of animus toward her, but certainly he's managed it, right? He doesn't reply to her text messages on the tablet. He barely takes her phone calls. I'm sure it's annoying, but it feels like he's within himself has boundaries of like,
don't pick up the phone if crazy calls.
You know what I mean? Because he knows Sarah is boundaryless, and it's like arguing with the stop sign. Don't do it. Still gonna say stop. Okay, so then she calls Rick. We're on the 24th. She calls him at 10:52, and then at 10:54, he does not accept. She calls her brother at 10:56, does not accept. Does she not have a prison job? Girl, you on the phone all day. Brian on the 24th, still at 11:13 in the morning. Rick at 11:15, not accepted. Peter G at 5:15, not accepted. Then she calls her son at 5:17, not accepted. Then she calls Brian in succession. Not 7, sorry, did I say 7? 17, 5:17. So then 5:18, 5:19, 5:21, she calls Brian, not accepted. Which, how annoying, you got to keep going, not because you don't want it to keep ringing, right? Or go to your voicemail. So then she calls Rick on the 25th, bright and early, 10:18, 30 minutes they talk. Then she calls her son at 11:36 a.m., not accepted. She calls Peter G at 1:59, not accepted. She calls Julian D, the other half of Delapine Creative, Julian Delapine, at 2:02, and they talk for 29 minutes and 48 seconds. So we're on the 25th still, 5:18 in the evening. She's calling Peter. She's going to call him back to back. 5:18, 5:20, 6:55. None of those are accepted. 6:57, she calls her son, not accepted. Then she calls Rick again, 9:29, not accepted. 9:29 on the 26th, so it's 9:29 a.m. And then 9:31, she calls him again. He answers. They talk for 1:28, and then she hangs up. And then she tries Peter again, 10:10, 10:11. Then she goes at 10:12 to Julian. None of those are accepted. She calls Brian on the 26th at 10:14 in the morning. They talk for 3 minutes and 27 seconds, and then she hangs up. She calls Peter still on the 26th at 2:45. He answers, and they talk for almost 30 minutes, 29 minutes, 49 seconds. Then at 3:48, she calls her son. They talk for 7 minutes and 49 seconds, and then he hangs up. Then she's back to calling Rick. So she's going to call him. This is the 27th. He's the first call of the day. 10:01, she calls him. 10:04, 10:46, 10:48. He does not accept any of them. Then she calls her brother at 10:50 a.m. He does not accept. Then she calls, this is the next day. So nobody talked to her. Or no, her son talked to her on the 26th and Peter did, but the rest of them were left her on red. Okay, so then we go to the 28th, 9:46. Rick is her first call of the day, not accepted. 2 minutes later, she calls him. They talk for 25 minutes and then they're out of time. She calls her son that evening at 5:54. They talk for 21 minutes and then they time out. We've got Rick again. This is the 29th. So 10:16, 10:18, she calls him. These are free calls. He doesn't accept either one. Then she calls Peter G at 11:31, 11:32. He does not accept. Those are prepay public calls. Then she calls her brother at 11:34, not accepted. Then she calls David LaFontaine at 11:35, not accepted. Then she calls Jalen Lawson. Help me out, guys. I couldn't remember. I feel like we've talked about Jalen before, but I don't have it. I need to organize my notes. If you guys remember who that is, let me know. I feel like it was a former prisoner, but I was trying to go back through the text messages, and I like this program that I use to edit the PDFs. It doesn't let me do a Control F, so I couldn't find this person. But anyway, if you remember, Jalen answered the phone. They talked for 1 minute and then it said time up. That was a free courtesy call. So maybe there's a certain limit on the courtesy calls. Then she's going to call Peter. We're on the 29th. She calls him at 2:43, 2:44, 2:45. He does not accept. I wonder if other inmates give her a hard time. Like she's calling, hang up, call, hang up, call, hang up. No.
Like, hey, it's my turn.
Does that not happen? Is that only in the movies? She called Peter. Then she calls her brother. She hangs up. That's at 2:51. She calls her son at 2:52. He does not. So she's just looking for somebody to talk to at this point. Then we've got 2:42. She calls her son. He doesn't accept. 2:54. She calls Peter G. He does not accept. Then at 5:51, on the 29th, she calls Peter G and he answers. They talk for almost 30 minutes, 29 minutes, 10 seconds. Then we have 6:30, June 30th at 3:02. She calls Peter. They talk for 4 minutes and 49 seconds. So 6:30 is the date the notice of inquiry hit the docket. Or no, it didn't hit the docket until July. But if you look on the last page of it, it was written on 6:30, right? It was typed out on 6:30 and sent in. So that is when she was when she was sending to 9th District, the lower court, Judge Cranick, although she didn't address it to Judge Cranick about like, hey, what's up with my appeal? I've gotten this notice. And that's when she was like, she's okay if she gets another lawyer. I suspect they were finalizing that letter that was then sent, and subsequently I think it was date stamped in the court filings like 7/8, but it was dated 6:30. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so then they talk at 3:02 for 4 minutes 49 seconds. That's their first talk on the 30th. Then she calls her son in the evening. 5:10, not accepted. 5:11, not accepted. 5:12, she calls her brother. They talk for 5 minutes and 26 seconds, and then he hangs up. Still on the 30th. 5:57, she calls her son, not accepted. 5:58, she calls former husband. He does not accept. 8:50, okay, this is the next day, 7/1, 8:50 in the morning, she calls her son, not accepted. Then she calls Nicole at 8:52. and they talk for 29 minutes and 51 seconds, and then Sarah hangs up. At 3:36, she calls her son. They talk for 8 minutes and 22 seconds, and then he hangs up. Then she calls her brother at 5:41, not accepted. Calls her brother at 5:44. They talk for 13 minutes, and then he hangs up. Peter G, she calls at 6:09. Pin limit, so it doesn't go through. That's the free courtesy call. It says marketing. And then she calls Peter G again at 6:30, and it's not accepted. And that's also a free call. Calls him again at 6:32, not accepted. Free courtesy marketing call. So 7:02 on the first, she calls her son, not accepted. 7:04 calls him again, not accepted. 7:06 calls Peter. 7:50 calls Peter, not accepted. One of those is a prepay APOC call. The other one was a free marketing call to Peter. And she calls Rick on the second at 8:53 in the morning, no answer. 8:55 in the morning, no answer from Rick. She calls Nicole, 8:57, not accepted. Peter G, 8:59, not accepted. Calls Nicole again at 10:44, not accepted. Peter G at 10:48, not accepted. We're on July 2nd now. She calls Peter G at, were we already on? Yeah, we're still on the 2nd. Okay, so she calls Peter G at 2:38, not accepted. 2:40, not accepted. And these are free calls that she's getting, not accepted at 14:41, 2:41. So 2:38, 2:40, 2:41. All free calls, all not accepted. And then that evening, she calls Peter again, 6:40, a free courtesy call, not accepted. She calls Nicole at 6:42, a prepay call, not accepted. Then she calls her son at 6:44. They talk for 11 minutes, 58 seconds, and then he hangs up. So not a lot of love for Miss Boone on the phone calls. A lot of not accepted. And I wonder what's to come. I feel like this is a little foreshadowing, right? It's going to be less and less. And she calls so much. Like, girl, what do you have to talk about? I can't. It's all got to be complaints. Like, because she's the eternal victim. Nobody wants to hear that all the time. Like, what a drag, We all have had those friends. Hopefully we've gotten rid of them, who every time we talk to them, something is going wrong. They're like wimpy, or what's Winnie the Pooh's friend's name? Eeyore. Like it's always something wrong. Nobody wants to hear that all the time. So, and it's not like she has a lot of variation in her day to day, right? She's probably talking about what Nikki and Belinda told her or whatever. So, and she's got a long row to plow, right? She's been in prison since January. So what are we, like 8 months in? And people are already tired of her, but she's exhausting. What was one of the things Lana said? Like, talking to her sometimes was like putting your finger in a light socket. It sounds like a lot of people are turning their electricity off. Ma'am, they don't want to be bothered with you. And I don't blame them at all. I mean, I don't know how they standed you. That's not right. Stood you, put up with you, whatever. How they stood you for this long. My brain. It's only 9:44 at night. I don't know why my brain is shutting down on me. But listen, how much Sarah can you really take? I mean, we like to watch, but we're not interacting with her, right? Like, I can watch her on my TV for days and still scratch my head and be like, what? But if I had to actually talk to her, I would just be yelling in the phone, like, what you're saying doesn't make any sense. Oh my God. I couldn't, but it seems like people are getting wise. She's bringing new people into the fold, but they're not falling for her. Like, what's his name? Rick is not talking to her every day. And John K, not talking to her every day. Her brother seems to be talking to her a little more. Are they talking about those heirlooms, you think? That are gone, the ones that George destroyed, and then they were rebirthed once she unalived him, and now Brian has let them go. Make it make sense. All right, I'm curious as to your thoughts. I will talk to you in the comments. Toodles. Thanks for being here.